Last week we started a series all about conflict. And I said, when I started this series, we're going to do it for 4 weeks. I was originally thinking 3, but as I started developing this series more, I'm like, we got to throw another one in. Because here's the reality, right? All of your life, you've had conflict. For the rest of your life, you're going to have conflict. Right? Because you are around flawed people all the time. And by the way, you're flawed too. So what that means is we're going to ding each other. We're going to have conflict. We're going to have to talk about things. And you know, having lived any amount of time on this earth, that conflict takes you one of 2 ways, right? Conflict either brings your relationship so much closer. Have you ever had that experience where you had a conflict with someone, and by the time you were done, it went so well that you really got closer to that person? You ever have that? But that's not automatic, is it? Conflict doesn't automatically create closeness in a relationship. Conflict many times goes the other way, doesn't it? Conflict many times is so destructive that the result is you feel further away from that person. Have you ever tried to bring up a subject with someone and it went so bad that afterwards you wished you'd never even tried? You know, I became a pastor in 1991. Can't tell you how many times, can't even guess how many times I've had to sit in on conflict situations and try and help couples or family members or friends mediate in those conflict situations. I've seen it go so bad so many times. I remember one time sitting down with this mother and daughter, and they were in the middle of a huge fight, and they tried, and it went so bad that the relationship between mother and daughter changed forever, and to this day is not any better. I've seen that over and over and over again. Conflict doesn't automatically bring you closer. Conflict many times is the ending of the relationship. The couple decides to divorce. The friends move further apart. Family members stop talking to each other, right? We've all seen this. And it's a difficult skill to learn. I was on a forum recently, and I read this great story. This person wrote into a conflict expert, and he said, I got a question for you. He said, I go to a small church, and if one of you wrote this, I apologize. I'm not trying to call you out. To my knowledge, none of you wrote this, okay? I go to a small church, and there's a woman in the church who sings at the top of her lungs off key. Always off key. I've seen people plug their ears and move away from her. We all want to be nice. We all want to be kind. But this is really uncomfortable. What should we do? Signed, Silent in the Pew. So again, if one of you are silent in the pew, I apologize. And if it's me, I'm sorry. I sing loud, I know, but okay. So would you have the relational skill to know how to handle that? If that was actually you, and you were sitting by that person, maybe you're sitting by him today, and you're like, man, would you have the conflict resolution skills so well developed that you could handle that and have the outcome be positive? Some of you are like, yeah, just tell them to be quiet. No, that's not it, right? Some of you are like, well, I'm just not going to say anything. No, that's not it. Do you have the skill? Because obviously we're talking about something that would be really, people's voice. Do people get really passionate about their own voice and how they think they sound? Have you ever seen American Idol and all those singing shows? They all think they're amazing, right? So this is loaded, right? You're talking about a crucial conversation. A crucial conversation is marked by 3 things: strong emotions, high stakes, and opposing opinions. You have had them all your life, and you're going to have them all your life. So we better learn how to do this well. So years ago, I read this amazing book with the same title, and that's where most of my good, if you hear anything good today and next week, just assume it all came from here. If you like to read, pick this book up. It will just impact you so much. Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When the Stakes Are High. You will always have this. You will always have this. Unless you're going to go live in a cave all alone for the rest of your life, you will always have to face crucial conversations. So how do you do it well? How do you do it so that the relationship comes together, not falls apart? Now, so that's what we're talking about in this series today. We're going to talk about how to have conversations that solve problems, and this is only going to be part 1 today. We're only covering one part of it. And I want to give you a warning. If you've never heard me teach on this before, there are certain topics that I have to teach on regularly. Forgiveness is a topic I cover every single year, and every single year I cover it, it's always one of the ones that gets people talking the most. You know why? Because you're going to get hurt in this next year. You're going to need to forgive somebody. And so it's one of those things. This is another one of those topics I don't do every year. I probably should. But I'm telling you right now, this one is my own personal therapy. Okay? Sometimes I do it because I really feel like God is prompting me to say it for you. This one was prompted by God saying, you need to teach on this because you need to learn more. Okay? So I'm just doing therapy in front of all of you, and you get to watch me. But the reality is, all of us know that this is something for all of us. This is a lot of content, so I want you to think about one thing today, okay? I want you to catch one thing that you can change in your relationships. Just one. Don't try and assimilate all of this. It's too much. So I want you to be focused. Matter of fact, I want you to pray silently in your heart and say, God, what's my one thing today? What's my one thing? Because God has something that he wants to show you today. And you want to be in partnership with him and say, God, what's my one thing? So just pray that silently. Okay, now let's get into this. So if we're going to learn how to have conversations and solve problems, you got to understand the dialogue is the key. And again, that's kind of a duh. You all know that. You understand the dialogue is the key. You can't solve any problem you can't talk about, right? If you can't talk about it, you can't solve it. The ones where the conflict situations where I've seen the relationships get so much stronger is because they have dialogue. It's not always smooth and easy, but the result is they've talked it through and the problem got solved or the pain got healed. That's what you're trying to do. That's what you're trying to do. So it's all about conversation. So conversations can be tricky. And so here's what I want you to know. Just the basics about conversation when you're talking about a crucial conversation. The first thing is you got to keep both sides contributing to what the author calls the pool of shared meaning. You got to keep everybody talking. That's the point. You got a problem. You got an issue in a relationship. Both sides need to be talking. You ever been in a conflict situation where one person monopolized the conversation, talked and talked and talked? It's like, stop. It has to be that both sides are contributing. So this is right from the book. The idea of the pool of shared meaning, as you can see from this picture, is you have your agenda in a conflict situation. They have their agenda in a conflict situation. And in the middle is where you really meet. Now, you both, in order to be able to do conflict well, you have to put in your opinions, your feelings, your theories, your experiences. I have to put mine in the pool in the middle, and they have to put theirs in the pool in the middle. If you get to the point where you're not contributing or they're not contributing, you can't solve it. It has to be both people contributing their opinions, their feelings, their theories, their experiences. Otherwise, it's just not going to work well. So here's what the author said. When it comes to risky, controversial, and emotional conversations, skilled people find a way to get all the relevant information from themselves and others out into the open. People openly and honestly, and I want you to think about this. Is this what you have in your relationships? People openly and honestly expressing their opinions. Can you do that? Can you openly and honestly express your opinion to your spouse? To your friends? Share your feelings? Are you open and honest about what you're feeling in the relationship? Even when those ideas are controversial and unpopular, can you do that? Is that the level of communication you have in your relationships? That's where you have to go. Because the reality is, some of you know this. Some of you know that in your marriage today, some of you have topics that are off limits, right? There's pain in your marriage, and you do not even bring it up. You don't even try and talk about it. Some of you have pain from your past in some of your key relationships, maybe with your parents. You don't even try and talk about it. You got really, really hurt, and it is just something you don't even bring up to them. Now, see, we all understand dialogue is important, and we don't do it. We know that this is what has to happen. And now, why do we not do it? Well, because if I'm going to come to you and say, hey, you sing really loud and off key, that's a big thing, right? That's a potential crucial conversation. And so dialogue falls apart quickly. So how do you know that so again, conflict is here, it's in the middle, it can bring us closer, it can tear us apart. How do I know it's going the wrong way? Well, number 2, or letter B on your notes, you have to watch for what we call silence or violence. Watch for silence or violence, not physical violence, it's verbal violence. Because this is always a sign that your conflict is now going the wrong way. It's taking you the wrong direction. So silence is the easy one, right? It's purposefully withholding information from the pool. It's sarcasm. By the way, sarcasm is a form of verbal silence because you're shutting them down. Some of you are sarcastic. Some of you are in relationships or friendships with people who are very sarcastic. It is a form of avoiding the conversation. Sarcasm. It's not a healthy thing. Matter of fact, over and over in the last few years, I have heard multiple speakers and read multiple authors talk about sarcasm. Nobody has ever said a positive thing about sarcasm. What I continue to hear is it can't be a part of your relationships. Is it? Is it a part of your relationships? It's destructive. Sugarcoating. Some of you, this is you and you know it. You are hurt and you're not saying the full truth. You're saying maybe a little of truth, but then back off because you don't want them to feel bad, so you sugarcoat the truth. That's a form of silence. Avoiding it. Some of you, that's what you're doing. Some of you are just withdrawing. You ever been in a fight with someone where they just stopped talking? Maybe they even walked away. Maybe they were in the same house for days and didn't even talk to you. Ever have that? That's what's going on. So you're in this conflict, there's a problem, and they go to silence. You now know you're headed in the wrong direction. Watch for this. Oh my goodness, this thing just went crucial. Or the other side of this is verbal violence. Again, it's verbal, it's not physical. It's an attempt to convince or control or compel others to their point of view. Ever have someone resort to name calling? Maybe they threatened you, labeled you, or belittled you, or cut you off, or speak in absolutes. You always do this. You never do this. Absolutes. Changing the subject. You ever have that one? It's hard to catch in the middle of a conflict. I've had people do this to me. We're talking about something and all of a sudden we're talking about something else. Like, how did we do that? It's this. It's a form of verbal violence. Or overstating the facts, exaggerating. Okay? Now here's what this all means. So again, conflict happens. All of a sudden you see somebody go to silence. They stop talking, or verbal violence. They start doing some of these things. Silence or violence are an indication that they no longer feel safe to talk to you. Do you know what you're seeing when you see that? Do you know what you're seeing? Recently I was talking to one of my kids and I brought up a subject that was obviously extremely painful because they snapped at me. And in the moment I just stopped talking. I'm like, whoa, they need to go to counseling. Right? It's this. No, I didn't recognize it for what it was. It was an indication they didn't feel safe to talk to me about that subject. Are you missing that? Are you missing it when your spouse goes to silence and stops talking, or they get really mad? Are you missing what's actually happening? They are saying to you, I don't feel safe to talk about this subject with you anymore. That's what they're actually saying. Jesus encountered both verbal violence and he encountered silence. Jesus once turned to his critics. Again, critics tells you what you need to know about these people. They weren't fans of Jesus. And he said, does the law permit good deeds on the Sabbath? Is it a day for doing evil? Is this a day to save life or destroy it? And they wouldn't answer him. That's silence. They wouldn't answer him. Well, some of you are seeing that in your relationships right now, and you're just not recognizing what it actually is. Now, like I said, in years of doing this, years and years and years, I've seen so many good examples and so many bad examples. One time, a long time ago, I was at a church and there was a big team, and the team leader started to have a problem with only one of the team members. And it was a big team. They tried to handle it. It did not go well. The team member was just threatening to quit. It's like, whoa. So I was asked to be involved, so I sat down with the two of them. We went nowhere. So I brought in someone else to help. And so we tried again. We set up a meeting for the specific night of the week. We sat down together, and the conversation started. And you ever been in a room where it is so tense? It's like, oh, this is uncomfortable for everyone. The two sides were so mad at each other. And so one of the questions I asked right away, and I wrote it down, this is how I know what I asked, is I started with the team member and I said, can you help me understand why this person's changes that they've made recently have hurt you so much? And the team member, she began to, her physical body changed. She was like fist clenched, jaws tight, and it was like she was on the edge of tears. She could barely say anything. She stood up and walked out of the room. And the meeting was over. And I'm like, what just happened? What just happened? I called and then finally sent an email after 4 attempts to get a hold of this team member because she was a friend. And I said, everything seemed to change by that question. And here's part of what she wrote back all those years ago. She said, right now, my silence means I don't know what to say. By the way, she even used the word silence. Here's this issue. We got to talk about it. Bam, she goes right to silence. She said, you are correct that your question caused a negative reaction inside me and the rest of the meeting was affected by it. There was no rest. There was no rest of the meeting. And that's all she wrote me. And a short time later, she quit the team and left the church. Her silence was trying to tell me, I don't feel safe to talk to you about this. Silence and violence are always an indication that they no longer feel safe to talk to you. Do you know that now? Maybe this is your one thing today. Maybe this is your one thing. I'm going to learn that when my spouse goes, roop, that they're trying to say they don't feel safe to talk to me about this. When my kids go, roop, and stop talking, or wah, it's either toward you or against you, or away from you. I'm going to spot it for what it is. Oh, they don't feel safe to talk to me. Because that's what's happening in that moment. Silence or violence are indication. Now, and the key word is safety, and that's what they don't feel safe to talk to you. Here's what I want you to know. Do you know that if people feel safe to talk to you, you can talk about anything? And I mean anything. If people feel safe to talk to you, you can talk about any single subject on the planet. But the reality is, safety gets violated a lot. Now, once safety is violated, now you're really in trouble because nothing kills conversation like fear. When you fear you may be harmed in some way, you start hiding. It goes back to the very first story in the Bible, the story of Adam and Eve in the garden. What happens? They're afraid. And what do? They hide. Fear and hiding go hand in hand. Now, some of you are like, well, when they come at me aggressively with verbal violence, that's not hiding. It is hiding. It is shutting you down, right? It is intended to stop you from harming them. Just like silence is hiding. Just don't think of it that way. Matter of fact, did you know this? When you're scared, the human brain can only process 1 or 2 thoughts at a time. Normally, you can process up to 5 thoughts at a time, so we don't hear most of what others are saying to us. We have to lower that fear and defensiveness. Have you ever had that experience where you're like, I literally told you this in the conversation, and they're like, I don't remember it. I didn't even hear you say that. Have you ever said those words? You ever had that experience? You know why it's happening? Once the conversation goes crucial and silence or violence starts to happen, they can't hear you. You could be the most eloquent person on the planet in that moment, but they're not hearing you because they don't feel safe to hear you. This is what's happening in our conflict situations and why they're going bad. This is what's happening. All right, so have you ever seen this happen? You got to lower the defensiveness. And then the third thing you really have to do is watch for your own style under stretch, which I don't have any time to teach on. But if you flip your notes over on the back, there is a link at the bottom to a place where you can take an online test for free. It's 33 questions. It's not very long. And you can find out what your style is. Now, some of you already know what your style is. But the reality is this can give you more information. So you can find out because you are reacting too. So that's the first thing. You got to understand it's all about conversation. You got to have conversation to solve your problems. But the problem is we start having these conversations and people go to silence or violence, and we do it too. So what should you do next week? Huge problem comes up in your family. Huge problem comes up with your friends. You've got an issue to talk about. You start talking about it. Bam! They shut down on you or they blow up on you. What do you do? What do you do? The second thing you do is you've got to make it safe to talk again. You have to make it safe for them to talk again. Because yelling isn't talking and silence isn't talking. So you've got to make it safe for them to be able to talk to you again. One of the stories I read a while ago about this was a story of a couple named Jonathan and Yvonne. Jonathan and Yvonne had the number one conflict source in marriage is money. Number one. But right up there towards the top is physical intimacy. And they were having a huge fight over this. Matter of fact, he'd been unhappy in their marriage from the beginning because she was never in the mood and he wanted more, and so it was a common conflict source. And so whenever she wasn't in the mood, he'd pout and sometimes wouldn't talk to his own wife for days at a time. So one time, they'd had a big fight about this. The next day, Yvonne wanted to try and do what we're talking about. She said, okay, I want to have a conversation. Let's have a conversation about this huge issue. That's a crucial conversation, right? Strong opinions, emotions are going to be running wild here. And so it was a nice afternoon. They'd had a good day together. They were sitting on the couch, and Yvonne said, can we talk about what happened last night when I told you I was too tired? And he goes, well, I don't know if I'm in the mood to talk about last night. Okay, now what did he just do? Sarcasm, right? He committed, he moved away. He didn't move toward her. Now, what does that mean again? What happens when you see silence or violence? What are they telling you? They don't feel safe to talk about this. And by the way, have you ever had that? One sentence triggers it. One sentence. And immediately they're into silence or violence. This can happen. This happens a lot. So what do you do when you see that? Well, she did what we all do. She got mad. She's like, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I'm tired of you controlling everything about our relationship. And she got so mad, she stood up, stomped out of the room and slammed the door, and that conversation ended right there. Now, which way did that conflict take their marriage? You know, it took it towards more distance. More and more distance. Now, what's their future if they don't resolve this? And all of you know this. And these kind of encounters happen all the time. If I were to ask you, how good are you at conflict resolution? If you were kind of rating yourself, 100, I'm an A+, I'm an F. Where would you rate yourself? What grade would you give yourself? You know the tendency in all of humanity is we overrate ourselves, right? It's like, oh yeah, I'm easily B. You get myself a B, right? And if everybody's a B, that's not true. Because somebody has to be an F, right? We're all at different scales on this one. So here's what I want you to have in your mind as you think about where you're at with conflict resolution. The worst, the people at the bottom level, they ignore the need for safety and express what's on their mind with no regard for how it'll be received. Does that describe you at all? Or anyone you know? Some of you, you've got someone in your mind when you read those words. How many times have you ever heard, I've got people in my life who say, yeah, I just tell it like it is. I just tell it like it is. Like, oh, you are a destructive person. Because I'm just saying whatever I want to say. I don't really care how it impacts the pool. I'm going to take this big rock and I am throwing it in the pool, and I don't care how much of it splashes all over you, because I'm just telling it like it is, right? Those who are better at it, good, they recognize that safety is at risk, but they do the wrong thing. They water down their content, which avoids the real problem. When I read that sentence 6 years ago, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's me. All my life. All my life. You think it was safe to talk to my alcoholic father about the issues in our family? You think there was any safety there? I learned a habit when I was a kid. The only way to be safe was to not talk. I brought that with me through my life. And reading those words all those years ago just stunned me. It stunned me. Some of you, this is you too. Oh, you're good at it, but you accomplish your results by not speaking the truth about what your feelings are and how you really feel about this. Or not sharing your opinions. Because you don't feel safe to do so. You want to see what the best do? The best step out of the conversation, they make it safe, and then they re-enter it again. They talk without sugarcoating or pretending or faking. I cannot tell you how much those words impacted me all those years ago when I read them. I'm like, people actually do that? Somebody can actually do that? People do that. The good news is this is just a skill. You can learn it. What Yvonne should have done when Jonathan made that sarcastic remark to her, I don't feel like I'm in the mood to talk about it. She should have recognized it for what it is. Oh, this is a safety violation. Step out of the conversation, figure out what went wrong, make it safe, and then continue the conversation. That's what they're saying, without compromising. That's the goal. You can learn this. So how do you do it? Well, on your notes, you got to answer the question, why do they no longer feel safe? Why? Because if they go to silence or violence, sitting with my kid and all of a sudden they go, wow, violence over this subject, I should have stopped and said, why do they not feel safe to talk to me about this? I should have spotted it for what it was and go, why do they not feel safe? Do you know why people don't feel safe to talk to you about issues? There are two major reasons. Here they are. First, they feel disrespected by you. If disrespect is it's a bomb in the relationship. It blows things up. Or they feel like you have a malicious purpose towards them. You want to hurt them on purpose. When people feel either of those two things, they do not feel safe. For instance, if tonight you're out walking alone in a dark place and all of a sudden you see some big guy walking up with a big metal pipe in his hands, he's smacking it like this as he looks at you and he's just got a mean, nasty look on your face, how are you going to feel? You're going to feel scared, right? Just like, I don't feel safe here. And you're going to do what I just did. I backed up, right? You're going to protect yourself. Silence or violence is a sign that they don't feel safe to talk to you, and they are going to protect themselves, either by going to silence or violence. That's what's happening every time you see it. Every time someone shuts down, they just stop talking to you or they blow up. They feel like you are treating them disrespectfully, that's why they're doing it, or they feel like you're out to harm them. And the moment that respect is lost, the conversation becomes about defending your dignity. Not that long ago, I was in the middle of a crucial conversation, and we were on a walk, and a subject came up, and it was kind of painful, and all of a sudden I caught myself feeling this, and I'm like, wait, I feel like all I'm doing right now is defending myself. And that changed the whole conversation, because rather than me going to silence or violence, I was able to name it. Oh, I feel like I could defend myself. And the other person was like, oh, well, tell me why. And we talked about it, and we avoided a blow up. What was happening is I was feeling a little disrespected. And once we can name it, own it, and get past it, we could talk about the issue. That's what you can do this. You can learn to do this. Disrespect creates highly charged emotions. If you think about your biggest fights, and you trace it back to why you were feeling, why you blew up, why you walked away, you felt disrespected. It is tremendous emotion. And respecting someone else doesn't mean that you accept or agree with their behavior. I can respect you and not agree with your choices. The respect prayer is, God bless those who sin differently than I do. I can respect you even though you make different decisions than I do. Now, the good news is this. The people in your life today, they don't become defensive because of what you're saying. They become defensive because of why they think you're saying it. Do you hear the difference? It's not what you said. It's why they think you just said it. Oh, they're saying it because they think I'm stupid. They're saying that because they want to take over everything. It's not what you said. It's why they think you said it. You're being disrespectful, you're hurting them. It'll trigger silence and violence every single time. Do you understand that? So the key is this: watch for emotional reactions in the relationships that you're in. Watch for their emotional reactions. So again, silence or violence are big warning signs, right? They're telling you, I don't feel safe to talk about this. And they will create reactions. And you have to learn to watch for those. Now, here's the problem. Remember what Yvonne did? Once he reacted, she reacted, right? Well, what do you mean by that? And then she stormed out. Don't just react. You're going to see the reaction for what it is. They don't feel safe to talk about it. We need to talk about that. So how do you get to the bottom of their safety questions? 3 things. First, try to understand their perspective. They have a reason they don't want to talk to you. And you got to figure that out. What's their perspective? Why do they not feel safe to talk to me about this? We talk about this all the time. LUV, ever heard me teach on that? LUV, listen, understand, and validate. Listen, understand, and validate. Listen, understand, and validate. Someone blows up at you, listen, understand, and validate. Someone goes to silence with you, listen, understand, try and understand their perspective. Do you know what the Bible says? Fools have no interest in understanding. They only want to air their own opinions. So every time you've stood in the presence of somebody who says, I just tell it like it is, you are standing in the presence, the Bible says, of a fool who just wants to air their own opinion. They don't actually care how it impacts you. They don't care what your opinion is. I didn't write this verse. Not one word of that. He says to be respectful in our relationships, we need to care about the opinions and feelings of other people, not just our own. The second thing you need to do is apologize when appropriate. Because the reality is sometimes you were being selfish. Sometimes you were just being rude, or you were being inconsiderate. Or you were only thinking of yourself, or you were mean in what you said or did, right? Unless you're claiming perfection, you've done these things and many, many others. I was in a conflict situation. The Bible says a kind answer soothes angry feelings, but harsh words stir them up. I saw this once years ago. I have a lot of good stories too, not just all bad stories. I have good stories. One time I was sitting with these two friends. They were in the middle of a conflict situation, and I was mediating, and the one person went first, and she shared openly how much she'd been hurt by what her friend had done. And she was really good at it. She put everything in the pool of shared meaning. Here's how I felt. Here's what it did to me. Here's what I was thinking in the moment as you were saying these things to me. It was so good. And I was sitting there going, wow, this is really good. And the other person, thankfully, was listening. And as they listened to how what their friend was saying, they started to cry. Because they understood why they were so hurt. And when they could get composure of themselves, one of the first things they said is, I'm so sorry that you felt that way. Now, you want to guess what happened to their relationship? There are times you own it. There are times you say, you're right, I was wrong. I'm listening to understand, and then I'm owning what I have to own, because this is what kind words do. And then the third piece is, one of the most important things, and this is something I was able to assimilate a long time ago once I first learned this, and it's so important to do. You now use contrast to fix the misunderstanding. Because sometimes, isn't it true, sometimes they didn't understand you correctly. You've all had that. It's happened thousands of times in your life. You're just like, no, I wasn't trying to say that. I was trying to say this. They got mad at that, and that wasn't even in your mind. So you use contrast to fix those misunderstandings in the conflict. The contrast is don't and do. Write those two words off to the side, write them big so you remember these. Don't and do. For some of you, this is the one thing you're going to learn today. The one thing you're going to practically take away from here is the don't and the do. The don't is the most important word up there. It's where you address the safety violation. So they're scared. They don't want to talk to you. You got to get to that don't. Oh, I understand why you don't want to talk to me, but that's not what I'm talking about. And it restores safety. So let me give you some actual examples. I don't want you to think I'm blaming you for what just happened. I know this is a complicated situation, but I do want to talk about what happened and what we can learn from it. Have you ever been in a conflict situation where you just felt blamed for everything? It's like, boy, this relationship would be so much better if it weren't for you. It's like, how are you going to react to that? You're going to go to either silence or violence, right? Because you feel blamed, and blame feels disrespectful. Because it's never 100% one person's fault, right? It's like, oh, so blame is bad. It makes us go, whoa. And so it's like, no, this isn't about blame. I'm not trying to blame. I don't want you to feel blame. That's not what I'm after. But I do want to, and this is where you don't sugarcoat, I do want to talk about this one specific thing. And if you do that right, you can see them go, oh, okay. They relax. They come back. Here's another example. I don't mean to communicate that I don't think you're smart. I think you're very smart. But I do want to just talk about what prompted you to make that decision. What was your thinking process? Because it's very disrespectful to call someone stupid. And we hear that message in our mind all the time in conversations and conflict. When we react to it without even understanding, it's like, oh, you felt like I was treating you like you're dumb. I do not want to communicate to you that you're dumb. I think you're very smart. That's not what this is about. But I want to understand what you were thinking when you made this decision. And they're like, oh, okay. It creates safety for the dialogue to take place. Do you understand that? Does that make sense? You've got to get them back to the point where they feel safe to talk to you. That's what the don't and the do. I don't want to suggest the problem is yours. The truth is I think it's ours. I don't even know what the solution is. Man, can you imagine how wonderful that would be to hear in a conflict situation? Just those words alone. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't that create a lot of safety? I'm not blaming you. I'm not saying it's all your fault. I think it's our issue to deal with. We've got to figure this out. I don't even know what it is. And I'm not saying I got suggestions for you, but I want to be able to talk about it so we can understand it better. Do you understand how powerful this can be? It's the don't and the do. This is one of the things that I've used for years and years and years. It helps so much when you're in these conflict situations because, again, here's what I want you to hear this. If they feel safe, you can talk about anything. And if you can't talk about anything, then there's a safety issue. And you got to make it safe for them to talk again. All right, one more thing. You think it's been hard so far? Keep yourself under control. Now we're talking the really hard part. This is so easy to put on a slide. Oh my goodness. This is so hard to do in practice. If you read it all in the book of Proverbs, there are so many proverbs written about self-control. It's like, you've got to do this. It says a hot-tempered person stirs up conflict. So what happens, by the way, we tend to think of a hot-tempered person as somebody who does the verbal violence, right? They blow up. Oh, no. Going quickly to silence is also a problem, an issue with anger. We just don't think of it as anger, but that's what it is. Like, you've shown me disrespect, clump. That's your anger coming out in the form of silence. We tend to think that that's better than blowing up at somebody, but the reality is both are destructive to the relationship. Both are issues. A hot-tempered person stirs up the conflict. The one who's patient calms a quarrel. So easy to say, so hard to do. Because here's what I have experienced over and over and over again. Someone goes to silence or violence, and you know what it does inside of my heart? It ticks me off. Like, we got an issue. We got to talk about this. And it triggers my silence or violence because now I feel disrespected or hurt. So now I do the silence or violence thing. And all of a sudden you got two people just going like this. And that conflict becomes destructive. So one of you, and since you're the one here, I'm talking to you, you have to learn how to keep yourself under control. So there's actually hope for this because it's really hard to do. First thing you have to ask yourself is, what story did I just tell myself? Because anytime you feel angry or hurt or frustrated or confused or mad or whatever you feel, some of you are sitting next to someone you feel mad at today, you got to ask yourself, what story am I telling myself? Because you have a story and it's creating the emotion that you feel today. One of the most significant things you will ever learn about your emotions is this chart right here. This is what happens every day in your life, every single day. You see or hear something, you tell yourself a story, that story determines how you feel, and the feelings create your behavior. Every single day. Your emotions don't just come from nowhere, they come from somewhere. They come from the stories that you're telling yourself. One of my favorites, look at this cartoon. Why we'll never understand each other. What she heard, it's your law in life to stop whatever it is you're doing in order to serve my every need. What he said, hey honey, do you know if we have any more AAA batteries? Now, isn't that true? Isn't that true? I mean, if you've been married long enough, you know that's true. It's like you just asking a question, and what happens? Look at her face. Look at that anger. I mean, it is about to erupt. Why? Because she told herself a story. Now, was the story she told herself true? Most of the stories we tell ourselves aren't even true. Years ago, at a different church, we were hosting this huge event. The community was using our facility, and as the day went on, I found myself getting more and more mad. And I'd learned this piece. I'm like, hey, I'm feeling frustrated. It's like, I need to pay attention to that feeling and ask myself, what story am I telling myself? Because I feel mad. So I sat down and I journaled about it. That's how I know what my story was. I journaled, and I was telling myself that these people were only here and taking advantage of me. They were treating me like a slave. They didn't care that I was here. They didn't care I was doing something so nice by letting them use our facility. I mean, all this. So when I wasn't aware. Here's the insidious thing about stories. They are instant. Your brain is an incredible storytelling machine, and it tells you stories all day long, and they're instant. It's not like I sat down and I thought, oh, this doesn't feel good. I think I'll tell myself a story right now. Oh, no. The only way I catch my stories is by catching my feelings. Your stories are instant. And then they affect you. And once I looked at it, it's like, oh, I'm actually telling myself a story. These people think that they're better than me. Well, boy, how do you feel in your life when you think that somebody's treating you like they're better than you? How are you going to feel, right? Your stories create your feelings. And this is really good news. Emotions don't just settle on you like a fog, no matter how comfortable it is it may make you feel. Others don't make you mad. You make you mad. You make you scared, annoyed, insulted, frustrated, whatever it is. You and only you create your emotions. Now, some of you, that makes you mad just to see that on a slide. Because you are so used to telling your spouse, honey, you make me so mad. Or to your teenage kids, you make me so mad. Or to your parents, you make me so mad. Oh, no, they don't. You make you mad. By the stories that you're telling based on what they're choosing to say or do. Because someone else in that same environment isn't getting mad, but you are. Because they're telling a different story. So here's what I want you to write down. My stories create my feelings. For some of you, that's the one thing today. My stories are creating my feelings. Not what they're doing, not their behavior, not their choices. My stories, what I'm saying about what they're doing, is what's creating the anger or the emotion. Now that's really, really good news, because guess who gets to control what stories I tell myself? I do. I can change my stories. So how do I change my stories? Well, the second thing is once you actually stop and think about, again, what story am I telling myself that's making me feel so mad right now, so angry right now? So then the second thing I do is I go back to the facts. Your conclusions are subjective, but facts are facts. I love facts. Facts are just facts. They're just true. Conclusions, the conclusions you come to about the facts, hear me say this, most of them are wrong. I told a story last week, for those of you who weren't here, about a woman who was attending a church and she was scared about a surgery coming up. So she put it on her prayer card. Hey, would you come and pray with me at the hospital this Tuesday? I've got an outpatient surgery. I'm scared. And so she put that in the offering box, and Tuesday came. The surgery happened. No pastor. Never even showed up. Never came and prayed with her. She was so mad, especially when she called the church office the next day and found out he'd been at the hospital praying for someone else. So here are the facts. I asked for prayer. He didn't come pray with me. But he did go to the hospital and pray with someone else. Those are facts. And then she told a story. This is where we get in trouble. Oh, he's just mad at me. He's mad at me because I gave him that critique about his preaching a little while ago. So now he's mad at me. What kind of man of God gets mad enough not to come pray? So she told a story. And so she wrote him a nasty letter, put it in the mailbox 3 blocks from church on Sunday morning, walked in, and a member of the church came right up to her and apologized and said, I'm so sorry, you put this in last week. When I was taking out the pledge cards for this giving campaign, I accidentally pulled this out. I'm so sorry, Pastor never even saw the request. And all of a sudden she realized, I told the wrong story. And a letter to him is on the way. And we do this all the time. Your conclusions are subjective and mostly wrong. Just understand that. They are subjective and mostly wrong. Just look at the facts. These are the facts. And then, the hardest part of this, and something I wish I could take a pill for. Okay, third, change your story. And one of you has got to figure this out for me, because I can't figure it out. Why is it that people that we love and who love us, do we tell so many negative stories about them? Why is that our default? Why is it that we automatically go to, oh, they just did that because, and we tell a bad story? Why do we do that? Why is that our default? Why is it, oh yeah, they just want to hurt me? Why is that our default story? And I can't figure it out, and I don't understand it. And so one of the things I love so much, flip your notes over on the back at the very bottom. You see this, it says retelling your story. Look at the second question. I put it up here. This is, I have started to use this over the last few years. I probably only used it a half dozen times, so I'm not very good at it. But when I do it, it changes me. I change the story. Because when you're hurt and you're upset and you're frustrated, you catch it and like, hey, I'm telling a bad story about this person. Ask that question and watch what happens to your story. Why would a good, reasonable, rational, decent person do what this person is doing? That's not how we're thinking. That is not what you have in your mind in that moment. You're like, why would this jerk do this? Well, this jerk did it because we're telling a bad story. But if you do that and you say, why would my spouse, who's a good, loving, decent person, why would they say this? It totally changes your story. All of a sudden, you start thinking better about that person you're sitting next to rather than worse. Why would my daughter blow up like that? She's a good, reasonable kid. Really good kid. Why would she, what? And it makes you tell a different story. This is so important. Okay, now, if you're tracking with me, you're like, hey, isn't this about conflict? Because you haven't told me one thing I'm supposed to say yet about how to actually have the conflict over the issue. I'm mad about their spending habits, and we haven't even talked about what I'm supposed to say. Nope, we haven't. We start that next week. All I've done is shown you how to keep yourself under control, like creating the environment where the dialogue can happen. That's all we've done today. So I've got 3 questions for you. Well, actually, a couple of things. First off, what's your one thing from today? What's your one thing? What's the one thing you're going to put into practice because of this? For some of you, the one thing is you're going to start watching for silence or violence, and you're going to recognize it for what it is. It's a safety violation. They don't feel safe to talk to you. That's the one thing you're going to catch. For some of you, you're beyond that. It's like, okay, the one thing I'm going to do is when I see it, I'm going to step out of the conversation. I'm going to make it safe so they can talk to me again. I'm going to try and understand why they don't feel safe to talk to me. That's your one thing that you're walking away with. Hey, you seem really upset right now. Can you help me understand why? What have I done? Do you feel like I've been disrespectful? That's your one thing. For others of you, it's the last one. You're really going to focus on, I got to keep myself under control. I go to silence or violence too easy. And when I feel myself getting really heated up and angry or wanted to just shut down, I'm going to ask myself, what story did I just tell them? And that's your one thing. Next week, we will talk about what to actually say. But this is enough, right? We got a lot to work on in the 1 week. And here's why I'm so excited about this series that we're doing and why I'm so passionate about teaching this. In my lifetime, there have been 5 different crucial conversations that I've had with someone who has helped me understand areas of my life where I am really blowing it. Patterns that I learned from childhood that I carried with me all through life and I didn't even know were affecting my future. I am so grateful for those 5 crucial conversations that have literally changed the way I interact with people. This has the potential to help and bring help and healing into so many relationships. This is really important stuff to learn. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish today. Some of you may be just here or watching online. You're just exploring your faith with us. Jesus is the perfect example of both love and truth. He was always truthful and yet so gracious in the way he said it. But he never withheld the truth. He didn't sugarcoat anything because he told us, if you want to be with my Father in heaven, you have to be perfect like he's perfect. That's not sugarcoating. That's just the truth. And no human can be perfect. And so then he explained why he'd come on a rescue mission for all of humanity, willing to lay down his life on a cross for all of us to pay for what we've done that's wrong. And some of you, the most important need in your life today is to let Jesus Christ move into your life, forgive you, and begin his work from inside. And if you want that, it's a simple step of faith where you ask for this gift. You say something like this in your heart to Jesus. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. I want more of you in my life. I've heard that you died for me. So please forgive me. Come begin your work inside of me today. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, as we finish today, can I ask you all to take your little connection card out and just take a moment to fill this out? Even if you're a regular tender, just put your name down. But some of you just prayed and asked Jesus to forgive you, or you renewed your commitment. Some of you have a huge conflict coming up, and you know you have a conversation you need to have with somebody, maybe something you've been avoiding. We have a whole team of people that will pray for you. You don't have to tell us what it is if you don't want to, but just put it on this card, and then just drop it in one of the 2 offering boxes back by the doors where you came in. Thanks so much for coming. Don't forget Daily Vacation Bible School this week, and then we will be continuing this series next week. Hope to see you again.